Hi everyone, I am Chris. This is Simply Classic and today is New Pattern Day. So this pattern was actually part of our first quarterly subscription box. So the people who purchased the subscription box in the quarterly subscription, obviously, got this pattern first. And they've had about a month, roughly 3 weeks, a month, to actually work on the pattern. You may have seen some posted in the Simply Classic Inspiration group along the way. But basically, it is a really awesome bag. It is called the Busta bag. And here is what it looks like. So it is a bag that can be dressed up, dressed down. It is not a huge bag, but it's going to hold what you need. It's going to hold your cell phone, some credit cards, a small wallet, and just is so classy looking. I love it. You have two handle options. You have the faux handle option, and you have this chain handle option, either one. And for those of you who didn't get the kit does come with both, the hardware for both options. So in the bag, let's talk about it for just a second. You obviously have this wonderful shape. You have a flat closure. You can use a twist lock here. You can use a magnetic snap. You can use a slip lock, whatever you'd like. And then on the inside of the bag, you have a zipper pocket on one side. On the other side, you have credit card slots on top of a slip pocket that will fit your cell phone. And then, of course, in the middle, you have all kinds of space and room for a wallet. You have a key fob. It's a very roomy bag for being so small. So in today's video, we are actually going to make this one here, this blue one, but any faux croc or real leather, that's going to be coming soon, we'll do with this bag. And another thing I really liked about it is the fact that we have this really cool seam on the back. And we've got that top stitched. So there's no side seams, it's just a back seam. Okay, so we're going to start out by going over pattern pieces. So let's get going. All right, let's look at our pattern pieces. So we have our main pattern piece for our bag, and this is just one large piece. On the back, I have used some Decaville Light. Now, you're welcome to use foam, or if you want your bag a little stiffer, you could use Decaville Heavy. Whatever kind of stabilizer you prefer, you can go ahead and use on the back of this bag. I also have two pieces for my flap, and the flap, one piece has got some Decaville Light on it. The other piece does not have anything. And when you cut your bag out, you do want to go ahead and pay attention to the pattern on the bag. So for instance, this here is the center, and you see it's dark. You have this kind of dark streak going through the center. So when you lay your pattern piece down on that, you want to, before you cut it out, you're going to put the fold part right on this dark center. Line it up. Go ahead and cut that part out, and then you can flip it over, relining it up on the center to cut the other side out. With the flap, I did something similar where I wanted to make sure I looked at the pattern and fussy cutted that. And a good way to do it when you have a piece that's symmetrical is you can actually fold it in half and place a ruler right on the center mark. So for instance, in this case, I would want this design here, this crocodile, to be the center. And then you can just take your piece and butt it right up against your ruler, and then you know your center. And then you can open it up and you know that you're exactly centered on that pattern. So it's kind of a cheap way of doing it, especially if you don't have a see-through pattern piece, like an acrylic template. You just have a white pattern piece, whether it's paper or something else. The other thing we have are two handle pieces. Now, on the handle pieces, one is slightly larger than the other, and that's because we're going to do a handle that doesn't have any raw edges. These do not need to be fussy cut. I would just go ahead and cut these with whatever section of faux you have left once you fussy cut your main and your flat pieces. We also have an upper lining. These are all basically the exterior pieces right here. So let's move these out of the way. We have an upper lining, and the upper lining is one large piece. Again, I did fussy cut this. You don't necessarily have to. It is on the inside of your bag, and these two, of course, ends are going to connect. So just, you have enough faux to fussy cut it if you'd like. We also have two lining pieces, and on my lining pieces I put some woven interfacing. Now you can use SF101, you can use Woven Fuse 2, you can use whatever kind of woven interfacing you would like, but on this linen I really like using the Woven Fuse 2. We also have a slip pocket, which is one large piece, and again, woven interfacing on the back. We have zipper pocket pieces, two of those, again with some woven interfacing on the back. We have our credit card pieces. Now the credit card pieces are cut from the main part of the fabric, so I don't worry too much about fussy cutting this piece, this kind of unusual piece, because this is going to be the final credit card slot. It's going to go on top, so you're really not going to see a lot of this pattern. So I just cut this piece out regular and then fussy cut the larger square or rectangle piece. You also have two lining pieces, and the lining pieces are slightly smaller. When you cut these, or when you look at the pattern piece, there is a line, a dotted line at the very top of the pattern piece, and that is the cut line for your lining. So just make sure that you cut the lining smaller, both in this case and also in the case of the other lining piece. And again, I'm using my adhesive lining for these credit card slots. And then you're going to have a slip pocket accent, you're going to have a key fob, and a zipper overlay. And those are all the pieces to the bag. So we're going to start off with the handle and get stitching. First thing we're going to do is work on the handles. Now one handle, as you can see, is shorter than the other, and that's because we're going to do a method where we have no raw edges. And the first thing I want to do is draw a line down the center. Now the pattern is written for the finished handle to be 1.5 inches. Therefore the width of these handles is 3 inches. So we're going to draw a line down the center of that one and then repeat for this other one. From here, I am going to use 1/2 inch double-sided tape, and I'm going to place the double-sided tape right on top of that line. I'm going to cut it just short of the edge because we're going to sew our short edges together, and I don't want to have any problem with the double-sided tape. So go ahead and put the short edges together, and we're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now from here we're going to open the seam allowance up, and we're going to top stitch on both sides. I'm going to just take a little bit of this paper off the tape to hold this down, and then go ahead and stitch. Before we go any further, before we stitch this side, we want to put our swivel clasps on the strap. So go ahead and just fold this in half and slide this on. And you can put them both on the same side at this point. There's no problem with that. Just so that they're on. Okay, making sure the handle's not twisted, we're going to go ahead and stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance to stitch this other side closed. Okay, we're going to once more open this seam up and top stitch. So I sewed over my double-sided tape there a little bit. I cut it a little long, which is not a problem. I just need to rip that off, and then we'll top stitch. Once both of the seams are top stitched, at this point we're going to peel the backing off the tape and go ahead and start folding our handle into the center. Now we're only going to fold it one time, and what I mean by that is typically when we do handles we fold them into the center and we fold them again. We're not doing that this time. We're just going to fold it into the center. So I'm going to make sure that the center, these two long edges meet in the center instead of leaving a space. I'm going to fold that right on the line. I'm going to fold this other edge again right on the line so that they meet perfectly in the center. There's no space. So continue folding until you're all the way around. Okay, once the edges are folded in, you want to make sure that your swivel clasps are pointing to the outside like this one. So if they happen to be pointing to the inside, just go ahead and twist it around. And then we want to divide these. So we're going to put one on one side and one on the other. And what we don't want to happen is for the clasp to end up exactly where our stitch is. The stitch is the weak point. If we put this right on that stitch and fold it, this is going to have a greater chance of coming apart, number one. And number two, we have a lot of bulk there. So we're actually going to make the seam be in the back, which is why the handle, the one piece of the handle is cut shorter. So when you separate the handles, or the swivel clasps, you will see on both ends your seam is showing on the back side. Now you can kind of eyeball this to see exactly how far they need to be. You know, probably nobody's going to sit there and measure, but roughly it is about a 1/2 inch. The seam's about a 1/2 inch to the back. To hold this together as I sew it, I'm going to put some more double-sided tape. Now, you're going to sew on each edge, so you want to put the double-sided tape in the middle. And basically, when you use this method, you're not sewing over your double-sided tape at all. So it's kind of nice. And then, of course, you have no raw edges. So I'm going to just put this right down the center, right along that fold. Peel the backing off. And then I'm just going to make sure as I lay these handles down together that they do match from side to side. I just want to make sure they're even. Okay, so now from here, we are going to stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge. When we get down to this point, we're going to stitch, if your machine can do it with your foot, you're going to stitch just beyond this seam and stitch along the hardware, and then you're going to turn, go back down the other side, do the same thing, and then finish off. So I want to come just beyond that seam. I'm going to turn, stitch right beside the hardware. Turn again, and I want to go ahead and cover my hardware. You can see the bottom of this foot is going to end up right on top of that hardware. I don't want it scratched. So I'm just going to put a little piece of leather or faux underneath there. Okay, I'm approaching the other side. Turn, stitch beside the hardware. Make sure I cover my hardware. I do not want that to get scratched. Now, because this is a print, it's going to be really hard to see the back stitches, so I am going to back stitch. But I am going to pull the thread through to the back here so that when I cut my threads off, they're all on the same side, and then I can just use a lighter to singe them. So now I have all 4 threads on the same side here. I'm going to cut and then just touch it with a little bit of heat, and we will be completed with this handle. So now this handle is complete. We're going to work on the chain handle. Now you can certainly just leave this as chain and not put the leather through, but I'm going to go ahead and put it through. I think it looks really nice. So how I'm going to do this is super simple. I'm just going to come up in this first hole. I'm going to turn and come up again to kind of lock it in. I'm going to come up in the same open chain. Once I get it in, I'll show you. Okay, so you see how that's looped twice around that first chain. I'm just going to pull this tight. And we're going to end up putting a little bit of super glue on this and cutting the tail off. But for right now, we just want to take the other edge. And we're just going to continue in an up and down motion, coming up the next chain and down the following one. I will say that as you do this, you want to go ahead and pull this through each time, because if you don't, there's going to be a lot of stress. If you wait till you get to the end and try to pull it, there's going to be a lot of stress on this piece of leather, and it is only 1/4 inch thick, so it will break. So just do it up and down. Pull it through, and then continue on. Now, as an alternative, you could, instead of doing every single link of chain, you could do every second link. It's whatever you prefer here. This is your bag, so you get to do whatever you'd like with it. Okay, so I'm going to continue down and finish feeding this through the rest of the chain, and then I'll show you how to finish these edges. I've threaded this all the way through, and I just went through the last link. So I've got about this much tail left. I'm going to re-push it through that last link one more time so that it folds around it, just like I did on the first link. And what I want to do is put a little bit of super glue on the actual leather and just let it super glue to itself. So I have some Loctite super glue here. And of course, you always want to make sure you do not touch this with your fingers. So I'm just going to put a little dab of it here. Fold this over. I'm going to put a clip, make sure it stays. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So just where the pieces of leather intersect, go ahead and put a little dab. It doesn't take much. There's really not going to be any weight on this leather, so it's not like you have to worry about it breaking or anything. It's just a decorative piece. Okay, once the super glue dries, I'm just going to go ahead and clip off the tails, and then this chain piece will be completed. So now that the handles are done, we're going to move on to the main body. So you're going to take your main body piece and you're going to fold it over and make sure that these two edges line up. I'm going to put a few clips, and we're going to stitch this using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now most of the pattern is a 1/4 inch seam allowances because of the curves, but this part here is 1/2 inch. Now from here we want to open the seam allowance, and we're going to top stitch this on both sides. So you're going to have to stitch in the tunnel. So the way I'm going to do it is turn this bag this way, obviously because we want to stitch here. I want the largest part of the bag, meaning the bottom, to be facing me, and I'm just going to slide it back. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to slide it forward. Slide it forward so I start at the top of this seam. And then what's going to happen is as I stitch, it's going to get easier and easier. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple little back stitches and then stitch down. And that's one side, and then we're going to do it one more time. So just make sure that the largest part of the bag, meaning the bottom, is facing you. You're going to make sure the other seam is down. You're going to slide it in from the back. and then top stitch. Now, if this is something that you feel like is a little difficult or you can't get it in there very well, you can certainly just put some double-sided tape to hold this seam open. And don't top stitch at all. Okay, so now that is top stitched, ready to go. So from here, I want to find the center of my front. So I'm going to fold this in half, match up the sides, and then just put a little bit of a notch here in the center front. I'm going to lay the seam right against that center point. I'm going to put some clips. Now when you do this, these sides should match up. Okay, you see how those match up perfectly? And all we're going to do at this point is stitch the bottom. Now the bottom needs to be stitched at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So from here, we are just going to pinch these little box corners open. Now, I'm going to make sure that the seam allowance, instead of trying to open it, it's just going to one side, and just make sure that it goes to that same side on the other side of this bag. So this is a tiny little box here. Just going to pinch this together, and then we are going to stitch. And you're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So from here, you want to just slightly trim the seam allowance down to about 1/8. And you just want to pretty much get this even and nice and flush. And then we're going to turn the bag. So I'm going to make sure the corners are in first. And then make sure you poke your box corners out. And there we have our basic bag. So we're going to set this aside for just a minute, and we're going to move to the flap. So take your flap pieces, we're going to put them right sides together, and we're going to clip. Now we want to make sure we sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance because we do have curves on here. I'm going to leave the top open, and I'm going to sew with the Decaville side facing up because I want to make sure I do not sew on top of my Decaville. The corners are fairly sharp corners, so go ahead and take some hand stitches or some hand reels if you need to. So once you sew this, you want to make sure that you cut back the seam allowance in the corners and along this bottom. The sides aren't as important because you've got a straight seam there, but wherever there's curves, you want to make sure that you cut the seam allowance to about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so from here, go ahead and turn the flap. I'm going to stick my fingers in the corners and make sure they're poked out real good. And then I'm going to clip all along the seam. I want to make sure that the corners look good and even. And now we're going to top stitch. Now, if you decided that you wanted to use a magnetic snap instead of the twist lock, you would certainly make sure that you install the magnetic snap before you close the top. I'm going to do the twist lock. I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm not going to worry too much about it yet. We're going to end up putting that on pretty much after the bag is completed. I'm going to take some hand stitches here in the side, or hand turns. Just want to make sure that this looks really nice. And we have the flap completed. So from here, we're going to go ahead and put the flap on the bag. So if there's a side you like better, you want to make that your right side. So I like this side the best. So I'm going to put right sides together with the back of the bag. So I'm going to find the center of my flap first. And I think I want this to be the right side. So I'm going to put the center mark right on the seam, and I'm going to clip. So I'm going to flip this over, and I'm just going to baste. I'm going to just push this out of the way and baste this flap on. So what's going to happen is this flap is going to come over and close. So wherever you want to put your tag, I like to put it here in the corner. You want to go ahead and add your tag, and then the exterior at this point would be completed. Okay, we're going to move on to the lining. We have our slip pocket, and it is slightly taller than it is wide. So your width is your 8.5. The height is 9. So go ahead and put, this is the 9-inch side here on each side. We're going to fold this in half so that the pocket ends up being 4.5 inches tall. Put a few clips, and then we're going to stitch down each side using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Go ahead and fold the seam right on your stitch line. Hold that seam down and poke out the corners. And then of course you can use your turning tool to get the rest of the corner poked out nice. From here, you go ahead and take this over to your iron and get it nice and flat. And then we're going to baste the top closed. Get your slip pocket accent piece. We're going to put some double-sided tape down each long side. Now if your machine does not like double-sided tape, you can certainly just use clips here. We're going to peel the backing off one side, and then we're going to center the pocket on the accent piece. Peel off the other side, and then we're going to fold this accent piece over. And you can see, you'll know if you have it in the center, because as I go to fold this, my edges don't meet here. You can see they're off. So I have to move the pocket down some. If you're not sure where the center is, you can certainly use a ruler and mark that. There we go, much better. I'm just going to fold this over nice and tight. And then I'm going to go ahead and stitch 1/8 of an inch from the raw edge to get this accent piece on. Once it's on, you can go ahead and clip it off so that it's even with the edge of the pocket. And then we have our slip pocket part completed. But the credit card slots go on this. So to go ahead and take your credit card slot pieces, and we are going to peel the adhesive paper backing off, or the paper backing off the adhesive, I should say. And we're just going to lay this down on the back of the pocket. Now, the good thing about this is that it is nylon. It is very slippery, therefore very slippery. So your credit cards are going to go in and out of here really easily. And you don't have to use any glue. So when it comes, you can see, you're going to have like little wrinkles in it where it has been folded. Don't worry about that. The wrinkles don't stay. Once you take the backing off the paper, everything's nice and smooth. So just center it. On top, smooth it out. And then we're going to put some 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch, one of the two, double-sided tape along the very top of both of these edges and fold them over and top stitch. Now on this pocket piece, you want to make sure that when you fold this edge over, this top edge meets this little short edge here. Okay, so see how those edges right there meet up? So we're going to stitch 1/8 inch and top stitch this. On this one here, you're going to fold it over basically along the lining edge. So if you need to mark down where the 1/2 inch is, you can certainly do that. That is not a problem. Okay, so we're going to top stitch these. And now you want to take the piece that has the angles. We are going to measure up from the bottom 1/2 inch. And we're going to center this credit card slot piece on that 1/2 inch line. So if you want to maybe just crease the pocket, you can certainly do that. Okay, so from here, you're going to stitch just along this bottom edge, and you're going to use a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And you are sewing all the way through to the other side of the pocket. Okay, so from the back, you just see a line, but that's going to be sewn onto the lining. So unless somebody goes in there and starts pulling their pocket away, they'll never see it. And then this is the first credit card slot. So on this one here, we want to use a little bit of double-sided tape to hold it. And we certainly could have put some double-sided tape on here to hold that. Got a little ahead of myself. But I do want to put some on here. I'm going to put it just down the side, across the bottom, and up the other side. And what we're going to do is peel the backing off the tape and set this right on top. Now you want to make sure that this top edge basically covers this seam right here. You don't want it all the way up. You really just want it 1/2 inch. The bottom of this is basically going to be at the bottom of the pocket, and that should just cover that seam right there so you don't see it. Okay, so you don't want it obviously to be like this, but you don't want it to be up so high either that you can't get your credit cards out, or they are too far up on the pocket. So you're just going to barely cover it, and by doing that, your pocket at the bottom should match up. So I can see where my center line is because of the pattern on the faux, and I can just match that up with the center line here. So we're going to peel the backing off this tape. And then we're just going to line these up. Just like that. Now I want to measure from each side 2 3/4 inches. And I'm going to make a mark with a fabric pen. And when I stitch, I'm going to stitch down, over, I'm going to go up between these two lines and then come right back down. Don't take an extra stitch. You're just going to go up and down and stitch over your previously stitched stitches as you stitch the center seam. And you go over and come back up. I want to make sure these sides are nice and covered. And what I'm actually going to do to make this a little bit easier is I'm going to turn the pocket this way, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch this side, stitch this here, and then stitch this side. And then when I attach this to the lining, I'll be able to catch the bottom. So that will be a little bit easier way to do this, because if you start up here and you start stitching, you have a chance of taking this top credit card slot and it'll slide down, and then you're going to be able to see the seam underneath. You certainly don't want to do that. So I'm going to use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And when I back stitch at the top, I'm going to come all the way up to the top, and I'm going to turn around. I'm not going to turn, I'm just going to back stitch, but I'm going to back stitch over both tops of the credit card slots. And that's just going to hold that really nice and secure. So I'll do the other side. So you're going to have to put the project a little bit further under your machine, but that's okay. Back stitch really good there. And then one more time, we're going to come up between those two lines we drew. I'm going to start at the bottom. Okay, so that's the pattern that you see in the back, if you really look hard and you want to pull your pocket away and look at it. But from the front, we have nice credit card slots that credit cards fit in beautifully. Okay, so now let's take a piece of our lining, our main lining, and find the center. And we're going to lay this on matching our centers, and now we're going to stitch the pocket on by going down across. When we go across, go ahead and catch the bottom of this credit card slot. Otherwise your credit cards theoretically could go right through, and then come back up. I'm going to use a couple of magnets to hold this in place. These are the So-Tights. Making sure everything looks even. And from the top, you're going to come down 1 inch. So I'm a little bit low here. I'm just going to slide this pocket up a tad. And we're going to stitch. All right, and there we have the pocket completed. So we have a nice slip pocket for your phone with credit card slots. So let's work on the other side of the lining, which is going to be our zipper pocket. So find the center. We're going to put some double-sided tape on our zipper overlay. And then we're going to put it 1 inch down from the top and centered. So 1 inch from the top. It's going to take a little pinch here to know where the center is on the overlay. Line that up with the ruler. And now we're going to stitch around the outside edge. Typically I pull my threads through and tie them off, but with this pattern on the faux, you really can't see back stitches, so I'm just going to go ahead and back stitch. Okay, from here, go ahead and cut the center out. I'm not trying to get even with my overlay. I'm just cutting it so that you cannot see the lining from the right side. Okay, so the back is beyond the overlay and the front looks amazing. Take your zipper pockets and your zipper. We're going to lay, I'm going to cut my zipper to the right length first of all. And you're going to lay the zipper so the wrong side of the zipper is against the right side of one of the pockets. And we're going to stitch. Now you want to open the seam allowance up so the zipper tape is laying flat and top stitch. from here, you're going to take the wrong side of the other side of the zipper and lay it on the right side of the other pocket piece. Make sure your sides align. Go ahead and put a few clips. And stitch it. Then we want to do exactly the same thing with the zipper tape. We're going to lay it flat and we're going to top stitch. Add your zipper pull. I'm going to just burn the edge of my zipper here. I'll make it easier to put the pull on. And then go ahead and put some 1/4 inch double-sided tape on both edges of the zipper tape. Now I want my pocket to close towards the left, so I'm going to make sure it's going in the right direction here. Pull the backing off the tape. And we're going to center the zipper in the hole that we just cut. And we want to center it right to left, as well as up and down. Okay, with the pocket open in the back, go ahead and stitch around the inside rectangle. So from here, we want to go ahead and close the pocket. Now, when you pull this top piece of pocket down, you're going to have extra space here at the bottom. Whenever you do a pocket this way, this is how it happens. Just cut that off, no problem. And now we are going to flip this over and pull the side back a little bit, and then we're going to stitch the pocket closed. Make sure you back stitch really good at the bottom, because we're going to close the bottom of our bag through this. our zipper pocket is completed. We're going to make the key fob real quick. And to do that, we're just going to take our key fob piece, put some 1/4 inch double-sided tape down one long side. Peel the backing off the tape, and you can certainly use clips here if you don't want to use tape. That is not a problem. We're going to pinch these together, these long sides, getting them as close as possible, but they don't have to be exact because we are going to go ahead and trim it off after we sew it. We're going to sew the raw edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to go to my cutting table, and using my rotary cutter and ruler, I'm going to trim this seam allowance back to 1/8 of an inch, and it's going to give me a nice smooth edge. Okay, once this is cut, you're going to slide your swivel clasp onto the edge of it and then put a rivet, or if you don't have a rivet press or any way to set a rivet, you can just use a stitch and go ahead and stitch that on. So from here, we're going to take our 2 lining pieces. We're going to line them up, making sure the side seams match, the bottom and the top matches. I'm going to put a few clips, and I'm going to stitch the sides. When I stitch, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance to start, so you can kind of see where this angle is. I want to use a half inch seam allowance, but I don't want to go all the way up to the top. I'm going to make a mark 1/4 inch down, and that is where I'm going to start stitching. So just mark with your pen 1/4 inch from the top. Let me start right there. Do that on both sides. And you do want to back stitch, and you want to do this starting at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then get a little bit larger as you go down because you don't want a bulky lining. Now, don't want to forget my key fob. I'm going to go ahead and stick that in. And I usually set it at an angle. I don't put it straight across because it's going to fall to the bottom of the bag. So I'm just going to set it at an angle and just make sure it comes to about the bottom. I'm making sure I stop at that 1/4 inch mark. Don't go beyond it. You can go ahead and cut off this key fob, extra key fob, and then you can press these seams open, either finger press or press with an iron. I am just going to finger press them here. And you can see here that I have that little slit there at the top where I did not sew. All right, so set this aside for just a minute and take your upper lining piece. We're going to join these short edges, and we're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Go ahead and open the seam up and top stitch on both sides to hold that seam allowance down. from here, we're going to attach the upper lining and the lower lining together. And obviously we want to do it right sides together. So I'm going to flip my upper lining. And I'm going to align the, well, first of all, let me find the center of the front. Okay. Whatever side I want my back to be, which I'm going to use that as my zipper pocket, I'm going to align that with the back. Now, you want to make sure you put this on correctly. The top of this, if you do kind of go like this, you're going to see the top is these curved edges. So the part that you want to attach to the bottom lining is this straight edge. So just make sure when you attach it, you're attaching it properly. Okay? So let's see. I have to kind of think about this here for a minute. So you want the curves to go inside the bag. Okay, so the curves, when you turn this right side out, the curved part is going to be facing down inside your bag. And you're going to clip the top straight edge to the bottom of the lining, or the bottom lining, I should say. It's the top of the bottom lining. Whew. So I'm going to put a few clips in here. And I'm going to turn this over and I'm going to match up my center front. And see, I clipped the wrong side. I probably would have put this on backwards if I wasn't thinking about it real hard. So make sure that you line those up. And if you want to triple check before you stitch, you can kind of pull this out and make sure that, okay, yes, that is going to go the right way. All right, now on the sides, what's going to happen is you have this pointed edge here on your lining. You see as I pull this tight, this wants to come up, this is pointed, and you've got this edge here. The reason why we didn't sew all the way to the top is because you're going to have to take advantage of that little slit to get this to fit properly. So I'm going to clip up to that point, and then on this side, I'm going to kind of turn this, meaning, see how you have extra down here? It's not just going to go straight across. It's going to kind of come up the little hill and go back down. Okay, so you see here on the side, when I open this seam, see how that little slit right there has opened up? That's correct. That's what we want that. We want that to happen. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over here. I see how I have my mountain here and I have my valley, and so I'm going to open this up, make sure that this valley reaches the tip of that mountain, and then kind of turn it and make sure the other side does as well. Okay, so all that's attached. So from the inside, so I can see where the deco bill is, because I don't want to stitch on the stabilizer, I'm going to stitch all the way around this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So as you stitch, take this bag, this part of the bag, and roll it towards you so that it's always laying flat ahead of your needle. See, I'm going to roll it, and now it's laying flat. Now when I get to this point, I'm going to actually have to, right here, let me take this clip off. When I get to this point here, where that deco bill is, I'm going to actually pivot and turn just slightly to come back down this mountain. And make sure my seam allowances are open on my lining. And I'm just going to slightly pivot and come down. Okay, I'm going to make sure that all this is lined up good. Make sure my seam allowance is open in the back. Go up to the mountaintop and then pivot and come back down. So now that we have that stitched, we want to go ahead and make little clips in our upper lining to match the clip that we have in our lower lining. So all I'm going to do is cut out a little triangle right there. So you see now both the upper lining, which is this faux, and the lower lining have that little triangle in there. Okay, and this one does as well. All right, so now go ahead and fold the upper lining up away from the lower lining. And we're going to make sure that the seam allowance is going up towards the upper lining, and we're going to top stitch. Now, the reason why we're doing this way, instead of sewing the upper lining on first, is because when we put our grommets in, if we were to do it where we had a seam going straight up here, when we went to go put our grommet in, it would have cut our side stitches and our bag would have fallen apart. We certainly don't want that. So I'm just going to turn so this is underneath. Make sure my seam allowance is going up towards my upper lining. And then top stitch. Again, roll the bag towards you. That just ensures that you always have a straight line ahead of your needle. This time when I get into that corner, when I pivot, I'm going to be pivoting kind of like uphill instead of downhill. Okay, just follow the line of the faux here. Okay. If you're making this on a domestic machine, you can certainly pull off your base so you can have it treated as a cylinder arm. And then of course, if you have a cylinder arm industrial, you can certainly use that. But as you see, you can sew it easily without any kind of cylinder arm. It's not essential at this point. Make sure my seam allowance is underneath there. back stitch. So now we have our lining completed. We have a nice top stitch all around the upper lining, just as if we had sewed it on first. And everything looks great. So from here, we're going to put the bag together. If you're going to struggle with bulk, you may want to put the seam for your upper lining in the front instead of in the back. If you put it in the back, you're going to have the seam of your bag, you're going to have your flap, and then you're going to have the seam of your upper lining. This is going to be on the inside. So if the seam happens to be in the front here instead of in the back, it's not the end of the world, and it might really save you a lot of frustration if you do have problems with bulk. Otherwise, you're going to, or either way, you're going to stick your main bag inside your lining. And actually, let me find the center of my front here. I did not do that yet. Okay. And we're just going to line everything up. So we're going to line up our back seams, or your front with your back, however you decide to do this. Go ahead and clip. We're going to clip our front edges, or front centers, make sure they match up. And then we're going to go through and clip our sides. So you don't really have to mark your sides, because your sides are the humps or the curves, and they should match up exactly. Okay, so we are now going to stitch this together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When you stitch, you can push this aside and stitch from the inside, or you can go to a cylinder arm machine, whichever you prefer. Since I've already done a couple of seams this way on the flatbed, I'm going to go ahead and move over to the cylinder arm, and we'll stitch it that way so you can see how that looks. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and stick this on the cylinder arm. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now that we have the top sewn, we need to go ahead and put some clips because we have these curves and it's not going to turn real good if we don't. So in the valley of these curves, I'm going to make sure I cut out small triangles. You want to cut to your stitch line. Try not to go through it. If you do, just restitch. So that way when we turn, it's going to have a place to go. Along the top of the curves, I'm just going to put small little clips. Okay, we're back down to a valley. So I will go ahead and put some triangles in. Now, if you have pinking shears that work really great, you can certainly use them. That's essentially what we're doing, is mimicking that shape. So let me go ahead and clip here in the valley. And you want to make sure that the triangle, the fabric comes out as well. It doesn't stay stuck in there. So I'm just going to clip around the top of the curves. And then when I get down to the valley again, cut some more triangles. Okay, once you have all of those cut in, you can go ahead and pull the bag out. Now, you want to make sure, of course, that you get in these curves real good and poke them all the way out. And they're not hard to poke out because it's not a real severe curve. It's just a kind of gradual curve. Okay, so once they're poked out, go ahead and put the lining inside the bag. And I almost forgot about the turn lock. We got to put the base of the turn lock in. So before I do that though, I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. Make sure that everything looks good on the outside. And then I'm going to top stitch. And since I'm here at the cylinder arm, I'm going to go ahead and top stitch at the cylinder arm. If you don't have a cylinder arm, you can top stitch from the inside. Just make sure your bobbin thread looks good, which usually does, okay, right? So just go ahead and stitch here all the way around on the inside. If you have a cylinder arm, you can stitch from the right side. Either one works fine. So now we have a beautifully top stitch bag. Let's go ahead and close up the lining, get our grommets and our twist lock base and front on, and we'll be done. So before you put your bag together, you're going to want to measure 3 inches down from the front of your bag to put your twist lock base in. So I'm just going to pull the lining out so I don't accidentally cut it. And go ahead and install the base part of the twist lock. Now I like to use some double-sided tape on the back of this so it does not rub against the lining. The double-sided tape kind of acts as a way to hold it, just in case it wants to come out or somebody wants to accidentally try to pull it out, get it caught on something. And the double-sided tape really helps with the stickiness, just helps it all stay in there together. Okay, so now we have that on. I am going to open up my zipper pocket, and I'm going to pull the pocket pieces out, and then I'm going to reach in the pocket and pull the base pieces of my lining out. So basically at this point I am going to close my lining. And I'm going to close it through the pocket. Now this is a pretty big wide bottom, which makes it nice to slide the two. You saw how easy it was to slide the lining into the base, or into the main. It makes it a little difficult because it's wider at the bottom to stitch this closed, but it's not that bad. So I'm just going to put some clips . I have my centers marked from where I put my pockets on, so I'll make sure that those match up. Okay, so we're going to stitch this bottom closed. We're going to use about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to box our little corners. So make sure your flat's out of the way. And let's go ahead and stitch. Okay, so now we're going to box the corners. So just pull this tiny little corner out. I mean, it's really small. I'm going to, since my seam allowance is open on the side seam, Because remember, if you remember when we stitched to the upper lining, we opened it. I'm going to go ahead and open it. The bottom one, do the same thing. Just try to open it. And then I'm going to stitch using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then I'm just going to cut this back. I think I'm almost out of bobbin. Let's see if I can get through this. And we got one more. So open this up, open the side seam and the bottom seam. And then stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And cut that back. All right, we're going to slide that in. Tuck the corners in the bottom. And then all we have left to do is this zipper pocket. So go ahead and fold the edges under anywhere between 1/4 to a 1/2 inch. We'll clip and then we'll stitch. And we're going to hope the bobbin lasts through the whole stitch here, because I hear it is about out. So you're just going to use a scant 1/8 of an inch here. Oh, it made it, yay. All right. So the sewing is completed. Let's go ahead and stick our pocket in there. And all we have left to do is to install the grommets and the last part of the turn lock. Okay, so there is our inside. Could use a little bit of a press, but everything looks great. All right, let's talk grommets. So I know a lot of you are intimidated by grommets. I know it's a tough thing, can be a tough thing, but we're gonna make it easy. So you can cut the grommets that you get from us are pushed together grommets, and they are a 1/2 inch in diameter. The inside is a 1/2 inch, so you need to make a 1/2 inch hole. So there's no little screws to these or anything. They are just super simple. You can do a couple things. You can go to something like Tandy Leather, Springfield Leather, Weaver Leather, something like that, and they all have these punching tools. And you can get large tools like this that are a 1/2 inch. And we'll just go ahead and use this to hit and punch. If you don't want to spend the money on this, because these aren't cheap, you can go to Amazon and get yourself a little box of tools, which a lot of us have these. They're different shapes, and we're actually going to use one of these to cut the hole in our flap for the other side of our twist lock as well. So these things really do come in handy. One of the shapes in this is a 1/2 inch hole, a 1/2 inch cut. What am I trying to say? A 1/2 inch round. So either one of these tools will work just fine. You don't have to go and spend the money on this big one. This little kit is perfect. So when you put the grommets in, you want to, basically you're going to put them in the top part of this mountain. You're going to put about a 1/2 inch down right in the center here. You can certainly mark it if you'd like, and the way I would suggest you do that is to take a grommet, set it on there, take a marking pen, okay, and just draw roughly where the hole is going to be. When you set this down, and actually I'm going to punch it this way, so I probably should have put the circle on the other side. But when you're just going to set it down, you're going to punch from the inside, and you're just going to go ahead and hit it with the mallet. And you're going to get a nice round hole, super easy. Okay, and just like that, we have our hole cut. Okay, you guys can handle that, super easy. These grommets have one part of the grommet that's got a higher middle section than the other part. The part that has the higher middle section is the front. The lower middle section obviously is the back. So you're going to take this piece, you're going to put it in the front and put it through the hole. Okay, just like that. You're going to take your other piece, you're going to set it right on top, and you're just going to kind of give it a little push. And then you're going to take your mallet, or I would not suggest using a hammer, you don't want to scratch this. And you're just going to hit it with the mallet, and it's going to go right in. So I'm going to and there your grommet is set. So it's that easy. There's no screw. I mean, grommets are so pretty in bags. Don't let the grommet intimidate you. Go ahead and practice. Again, these grommets, we sell them in kits of 2 and in kits of 8, and it just makes it super simple. So I'm going to go ahead and put the other grommet in. I'm going to save your ears and not hammer, and then we will finish it up. Okay, both of my grommets are in. They're looking really great. The last thing we have to do is put the other part of our twist lock on. Now, I do give you a measurement in the pattern, and honestly, I think that what you need to do is to just kind of fold this down and make sure you like where that is. Let me get the plastic off of this. So you can just go ahead and fold it over and kind of feel where it is, or you can use the measurement in the pattern. Obviously, you want it centered. And I can feel it's going to be right about right there. So just lay this on your cutting board. I am going to use the shape that is the largest rectangle that's in this one. I think this measures, it's right at just about 3/4 of an inch. Make sure I see it right through so that it's centered, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit it. Before you put the other side of the twist lock on, I suggest you take your super glue and you just go ahead and put a couple of dots of super glue along the long edges between the flaps. So I'm just going to open this up and just right in here, just put a little line of glue. And it's not going to take long to hold down. Just helps when you go to install that this isn't going to come apart. I'll do it on this side too. Okay, let that dry for just a few seconds here. And then these twist locks do have screws. And you're going to want to go ahead and mark where the screw holes go. Because you're going to have to cut tiny little holes for the screws. And you can just use your hole puncher, that you use for rivets. You can mark it. It's obviously going to be right around the center of the hole. So I'm going to use the smallest punch on my punch here and just okay, so you're going to, of course, lay the front on the front part. Matching up the little hole marks. Sometimes I actually have to take a really sharp pair of scissors and cut the hole, like the side here, out just a bit. Just lay it on top and see what it looks like. It's going to cut a little bit of this away. Okay, that looks perfect. Put this on. Now, I also suggest that you put a little bit of super glue or Loctite on your screws. Loctite is this thread locker. It's a blue color, not really sure why, but it is. And just going to put a dab in the screw hole. Oops, that was a little bit too much. All right. All right, and just clean this up a little bit. We'll put our handle on and we'll take a look at the bag. One last thing is that you need to put your O-rings on. Almost forgot. So just go ahead and slide these on. And it's just going to be something for your handle to hang off of. The swivel clasps are not going to fit through the grommets, which is why we have these. Then you can attach your handle. And now we are done. Let's take a look. And here's the completed bag, the Busta bag. It came out amazing. I really love the length of the handle. It fits comfortably on a shoulder. It can be dressed up, dressed down. I can see this being an evening bag. I can see this being a bag that you just take to go to the supermarket real quick, you know, if you have it dressed down. The testers made some amazing bags with like these leopard prints. I mean, they're just gorgeous. They always do such a great job. So make sure you check out the tester inspiration section. And until next time, everybody, happy sewing.